taking that first step, unless you have sort of a unique set of skills that you've developed in a different business that would allow you just to start your own business from scratch. That's the power of a franchise, right? I think you have all the systems in place, you have all the accumulated experience on what worked, what didn't work, and the likelihood of success is much higher. So that's why I've always been a big believer in the franchise model. I believe that, my team is super passionate about supporting people to be successful. Then it comes down to what is the right fit? What's the right business for you to get into? And that's where people like yourself really help.
Yo, this is the Streetwise Podcast, where we help you level up your game, level up your leadership, and level up your life. I'm your host, Matthew McReynolds. I'm a multi-brand franchisee, and I'm a franchise consultant, which means I help people find, launch, and build their ideal franchise business. My main goal is to help you get off of zero and become the person that your dreams need you to be. Buckle up, get your popcorn ready, let's go. All right, Streetwise Nation, we got Kevin Wilson with us today, Chairman and CEO of Buzz Franchise Brands. Mr. Kevin, how are you doing?
Awesome, Matthew. Good to see you, and thanks for having me on. Great to see you again.
Yeah, this is really exciting to get to speak with you. My listeners know this, but when I got into franchising, my first franchise business that we owned, the very first experience that I had in business ownership is Mosquito Joe, which you guys curated and built up and passed over to Neighborly now. But it's really cool, and I appreciate you taking the time to just to chat.
I remember that when
This
you
is
guys
awesome.
came to the office. I think that was, you guys were you just married?
We got married on March 12th, and then we flew up to meet you guys the very next day on March 13th.
That's what I remember.
26. Yeah.
It's crazy. It's like, 8 years ago, right?
Yeah, we just started year 9 in Mosquito Joe, our 9th season. And as I'm talking to you, technicians are coming in the background right now. We've leveled up a little bit.
That's great. You've done a heck of a job with this. It's really good to see.
Yeah, no, it's been a great experience, and I have you and the Buzz team to thank for a lot of my growth. And I'm looking through as I'm preparing. I like to prepare for all these interviews, and just looking at your background before we get into whole Mosquito Joe and Buzz and everything you guys are building now. Just such an eclectic background. I mean, you're going Bain and Company to Bagels franchise to South Africa, launching an Airlines, to doing this kind of the same thing, but not in Mexico with private equity and another airlines, to Mosquito Joe. And then you build that out to this amazing franchise system. But I'm interested in the Oak Ridge days, the Western days, like you're growing up. What were you like growing up? Because I know you as this successful businessman that's built these amazing things. But what did your upbringing, how did you curate into the person that you are today? Like what was that like?
Yeah, probably like a lot of our franchisees. I mean, my upbringing was super humble. My dad was a truck driver for Esso or Exxon down here, as it's known. My mom stayed at home. My brother and I were always involved in athletics. So we had skates on our feet from a very early age, playing hockey, and then I ended up, sort of jack of all trades, master of none, that term. So I guess if there was one sport that I probably excelled at more than others, it was volleyball. So I played a lot of volleyball all the way through high school. But those were the days at Oak Ridge and Western. University of Western Ontario I went to the business school there, and it was a great school. It happened to be also in the city where I grew up. So that actually worked out well. My parents didn't have a lot of money, so that was a great way to, continue my education. So, but loved it. A little cold, but I've managed to get out of there and spent time down in Dallas, and now I'm in Virginia, which raising my own family here. So, but it was a lot of fun. Really enjoyed it. It was a great city to grow up in.
Yeah. Oh man, that's awesome. What was some of the biggest culture shock when you first moved down to Dallas?
Well, I didn't know much about Dallas at the time. I mean, I had gone to, I started my career at Bain in the Toronto office, and they were opening a new office, and it was in Dallas. And they said, does anybody want to go to help open this office? And so all I knew at the time growing up, I was a fan of the Cowboys, so I watched them.
There we go.
And my parents were fans of the TV show Dallas, so I thought I had it all covered and went down there. But it was great. I mean, for me, and you live in Dallas, so I mean, for
Yep.
me, Texas and Dallas in particular was from one extreme to another. Like just totally supportive of their entrepreneurs, their business. It's really where I started my first business after Bain was in the Dallas area. But my wife and I've always said if we weren't living here in Virginia, which is where she grew up and was raised, we'd be back in Texas for sure. So I loved it down there. Loved everything about it. Really, it was great.
Dallas is a beautiful area. I grew up in the Austin area, then lived in Chicago for about 5.5 years before moving to Dallas. And fun fact, I actually live about 2 minutes away from where they filmed that TV show,
Oh, is that
Dallas.
right?
The ranch, yeah. Whenever I drive past it every single day. And my parents and my in-laws love that show too, man. So
I saw I don't know if they still have it. I used to cycle a lot, and they had a race down there called the Collin Creek Classic, I think,
okay,
and it
let's
went
go.
right by the ranch. So that
Yeah.
was always a lot of fun. But yeah, always
Man, that place turns up. That place turns up. I'll tell you, just about every other weekend, they've got thousands of people out there doing some sort of event. I never know what they got going on, but yeah, it's pretty cool. So, okay. So we start the bagel franchise coming
yeah.
from a nice professional, what I imagine is everything that you'd prepared for education wise had prepared you to be in Bain and Company. When you pivoted to starting this franchise, did you just have an itch? Did you feel like it was the next step? What was going on when you took that leap?
Yeah, so a lot of my one of the things I didn't cover, a lot of my summers growing up in London, Ontario, was filled doing my own thing. So I shingled homes, I painted homes, I tarred driveways, I cut lawns, and so my summers were filled doing things on my own as opposed to going to get a job with somebody else. So I've always liked doing that, and so as I thought about Bain for me was more of an acceleration of my business education. So
Okay.
you think about what you learn in school, and that's great. But then when you go to Bain, you're really exposed to a lot of the big issues that big businesses face, and you're surrounded by an incredible level of people that are supportive and smart, and it was fun, but it wasn't a career for me. Bain was never going to be a career for me. Some of my good friends are still there. I mean, 35 years later, they're still there, and they love it. For me, though, it was always a stepping stone into ultimately, owning my own business. And that's what we did with the bagel concept. I started it with a brother and a good friend. We opened up our first one in Beltline Road in Addison, and
Let's
super
go.
competitive
Yeah.
area. You probably know the area.
Oh yeah.
And it was great. And right from Dallas at the time, the whole thesis was there were bagels on the West Coast, bagels on the East Coast, but nothing really down in the
Okay.
Dallas area at the time. And so, but that space got competitive very, very quickly. But we opened our first one. It was a success. We then opened a couple more. And then I met a guy named Joe Croce, who was the founder of CC's Pizza.
All
And
right.
Joe was really, a guy that helped me understand franchising. And so that's where I cut my teeth on franchising. Was we franchised Benny's Bagels as a concept, and over the next few years grew it to about 30 locations. And then we ultimately sold that business. My partners wanted to move back to Canada, and so we sold the business. And yeah, but it was fun. Learned a lot about small business starting that. A lot about franchising. Made a ton of mistakes. Made a lot of, and you're the beneficiary of all those mistakes that I made, because I tried not to make all of them again when we were doing Mosquito Joe, which was the next time. But yeah, I made a lot of mistakes. We were undercapitalized. We probably approved certain people as franchisees that we shouldn't have approved. We didn't have systems in place. There was a lot of mistakes. So,
How
but
has the franchise development process changed from
it's
those
changed quite a bit.
the Benny's Bagels
Yeah.
days? Yeah, maybe speaking to that a little bit, because for me, I'm 9 years into running my own franchise, but from the consultant side, I'm still 7 months fresh into this thing. So maybe coach me up a little bit.
Yeah. So I'll tell you. So it's a good question. So some of it's still the same. So you see, on the organic side, I would say a lot of it is still very similar. So we would advertise on our cups, on our napkins,
Okay.
in the store. We would have brochures that people could grab.
Franchise
Um,
available.
Franchise available. Sign up. If you love being a customer, you're really going to love
Yeah.
being a franchisee. So that hasn't changed too much. You've got the digital component, and that's really accelerated things and made it more, I think, efficient. Where there was a lot of change it was where you are in the consulting community. So, in the day, it was a very fragmented business, and we would literally go from, at the time, business brokers. The term consultant and franchise consultant really wasn't even used at that point. And they really truly
Interesting.
were business brokers. Most of them were selling existing businesses, but if you went to them and you caught them at the right time, they would also offer up candidates for that. But you have to go around to the different cities and meet with people. And so it was really hard, as opposed to the way it's done now, where you get guys like Jeff Elgin who have come and really created a great network effect. And he was sort of the pioneer in that space. But a funny story I'll tell you. So one of our early customers at Benny's Bagels was this guy named Kurt Landwehr. And Kurt
Okay.
comes into the store and he's getting a bagel. He really likes cream cheese. He really piled it on. I'm hoping he's listening to this. But he said, geez, this looks like a great concept. It should be franchised. And he asked for the owner. And I happened to be in the store at the time. So we sat down. And that's when we first met. And the next thing I know, I told him we were already in the process of franchising. And he said, well, we should sell franchises together. He goes, I sell for, and I take ads out in paper and I'll host an event at a hotel. But if you want to share the cost of the ad, you can get up and speak. And so that's what we would do. We'd schlep around to different cities in Texas. He had the area of Texas, and we did that a few times. And it was really fun to watch him. He's a total professional when it comes to development and speaking. And so I learned a lot from him. And of course, he learned his trade from Jeff. So anyways, it was really, it was fun. And that was a long time ago. I mean, that was almost 30 years ago. I guess it would be about almost 30 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, 30 years ago. Yeah, long time.
What's going on, everybody? I hope you're liking the conversation this far. Please take a moment, give it a 5-star review. It really helps spread this out to as many people as possible. All right, let's get back to the episode.
Wow. Do you feel like, so it's on one hand, there's a lot more uniformity in the broker networks, things like FranChoice and others that are out there, and the way that consultants and brokers are organized. But on the other hand, it's kind of the wild, wild west. There's not a lot of regulation to like how consultants operate. Do you feel like it's moving in a good, positive way, or there's things that people need to be careful of, or maybe a mix of both?
I think it's gotten a lot more professional than when I
Okay.
started back 30 years ago, for sure. I mean,
Okay.
back then, there was a lot of just shooting from the hip and not a lot of structure. There wasn't a lot of, not a lot of concern around people saying certain things. I think that's gotten a lot better. So I think whether it's the FTC and some of the stuff they put in place, I do believe that the consultant networks like the one you're in and others have really had a chance to help professionalize that space as well. So I think it's going in the right direction. I think I don't think there's too much more that needs to be done in that regard, other than just allow you guys as the consultants and us as the franchisor to have our own business relationship. And I know there's concern about other things and trying to interfere with that relationship, but I don't think that that's required.
It's super interesting. One of the things I love about FranChoice is just the accountability that's built in. And, you get a guy like me coming in, you've got experts that have been around for a really long time, and just the coaching and accountability that's there has been really cool.
Yeah.
I'm curious though, I'm a big believer, like our past prepares us for our present, and it's the failures and the pain points that help us to develop our purpose and what we're building. Me coming from a coaching and teaching background has definitely come full circle in how I educate and articulate business ownership to prospective franchisees. So I'm curious, do you feel like if you took away anything from your experience, do you feel like you'd be able to kind of be where you are today? Like if you didn't have the Benny's Bagels experience, could you have built out Mosquito Joe to where it was before it sold to Neighborly? Like, I hope that's not too loaded of a question.
No, I mean, I think I'm a big believer in that. I think everything builds upon itself, right? So we're all
Sure.
product of our experiences. My experiences, Bain was sort of generalized, but my experiences are largely in franchising and in the airline industry. And so I wouldn't say, you know, so very not overly broad, but just couple segments that I like. On the franchising side, I've had the chance to surround myself with a lot of really good people and learn a lot from them. But I think everything builds on another. Like I said, Bain was an acceleration of my business education. My time down in South Africa was sort of big business. It was the thing I learned about with Benny's Bagels is there was a lot of decisions we were having to make every day, and nothing overall moved the needle that well. Like I said, we were undercapitalized, we made mistakes. When I went down to South Africa and I was in the airline industry, I had to make a few really big decisions every year, and that's what really moved the needle. But there were a lot of people issues I had to sort through. So everything was a little bit different, I think collectively it helped me anticipate things. We have a saying at Buzz Franchise Brands that we really value this trait of being able to look down the road and around the corner. So sort of anticipate things before they happen so you can avert disasters. That I really believe only gets fully fleshed out with longevity and a set of experiences. I've met some people that could do it early in their career. They're sort of exceptional, but for the rest of us, it's just like, I've seen this play out before. Here's how it's going to end. So we're not going to go down that road. We're going to come back and do it this way. Those things are super valuable. And I really look for that in my team as well.
Love it. Do you have anything, if you think about your history and how you've grown, do you have any moment where you feel like, whew, man, we were so close to the sun on that one. We flew a little too close. Man, we barely missed that one. Praise God, it turned out the way that it did.
There's been several. I mean, and I've had literally that reaction as well. I think, in the airline industry down in South Africa, it was a fairly tumultuous time down there. This was, I was there from 98 to 2001. It was when, Mandela had turned over power to Mbeki. The country was coming out of apartheid. They were entering the real world, but it was still, in many ways, it was really the wild, wild west still, right? With, heavily unionized environment, having to deal with a lot of people issues. If you deal with it in a wrong way, things can explode on you. I had responsibility early on for running all the cargo operations of the airline. I remember my first week on the job. I just landed in the country. I get to the job, I meet my team, and the first meeting I had was with the managing director of Dell Computer. And 1,000 computers had come from Ireland down to our warehouse, and they disappeared in our warehouse, gone.
Whoa.
And so he screamed at me for about 30 minutes. And I mean, I didn't even know where the warehouse was. I was just that new. But we eventually figured it out. We had organized crime that was operating within our business and our operations. So that had to be cleaned up. And you're always asking the question, geez, what if we don't get this cleaned up the way it's supposed to happen? So there were a number of things like that overall, but you get through them, and you don't always successful in them, but you learn a lot from the ones that don't work out too.
Man, what was it like being a foreigner in South Africa, being from Canada and living in the States, to going to South Africa during the heat of apartheid? I mean, I know a little bit about the level of segregation that was going on at that time. Was that just crazy? What was that like?
Yeah, so this would have been, Mandela, I think, got released in 94, and then he was president in 95, maybe to 98. I might be getting my dates off a bit. I came down in 98. So,
okay.
Technically apartheid was over, and now they were trying to assimilate. They were trying to reconcile.
Sure. Yeah.
And entering it was tough. I mean, it was really tough. I think I love South Africa. My experience down there overall was great. It was a dangerous place to live when we were there. The people were wonderful. Yeah, I've got nothing bad to say about the country. It's just that it was just super intense. I mean, I think in my 3 years down there, of the 10 direct reports I had, 8 of them had been carjacked during my period down
Wow.
there. Yeah, I mean, really, that one of the first individual I hired was killed in his car, sitting in his car, visiting his mother-in-law. So it's a lot of highs and lows in the country. But I think we made a lot of positive change at the airline. They were just lacking a lot of leadership, and it was very, very tough with the way that they had set things up. So
Wow. So you take the leadership and, I want to get into Buzz and kind of move into what you guys are building, but just as we're tracking, I know we're skipping over some very significant milestones as well, but as you talk about leadership all right, you find Mosquito Joe, and at the time it's a local business, and you're able to raise money, buy into the business, and then flip it and turn it into a franchise. I see a lot of these organizations in the franchising space now that have the quote unquote shared verticals and shared systems, and they create a brand from scratch. But you guys took a business that was already established and then turned it into a franchise. What are some of the key significant differences between those two entry points into franchising? Like what kind of mindset do you have to have when you do one versus the other?
yeah, we've done it both ways. We've done it.
Sure.
Mosquito Joe was the one that we purchased. At the time it was a business that had 2 trucks and a couple hundred customers.
Okay.
So that gives you an idea for the size and scale. So still very small, but they
Yeah.
had proven
Sure.
they had proven out the concept. So they
How
had
long were
proven
they around before you guys came in?
probably about 2 years, 2.5 years. They were
Oh,
about to enter.
interesting.
We're about to enter
Okay.
their 3rd year, and we love the name.
Yeah.
But we changed all of the branding. So you've seen, obviously you know all about the branding. All of that
Oh,
was
yeah.
different. The marketing, the branding was different. Put in place the systems. There weren't really systems in place, but they did have proof of concept. And the thing that we had to figure out was what was the appropriate territory size that we should be able to grant. And that's something that
Interesting.
I think a lot of franchisors don't think through clearly enough. And what you'll see is, especially young franchisors, they think it's beneficial and it's easier to sell a franchise by giving a large territory. We don't do that. I mean, we think it's not beneficial to the franchisee or the franchisor. What ends up happening is you get marketing dollars that get diluted. Your trucks, in this case, their trucks and routes, they get spread across a much wider geography. So you have more windshield time, you have more downtime. It's just not a very effective way to do it. So that was one of the things we had to figure out early on with Mosquito Joe, is what was the appropriate territory size, and ultimately what type of penetration rates do we think we could get in a specific zip code, really down to the zip code. So that's the one way you mentioned, Matthew. And the second way was just doing it from scratch. And we've done that ourselves as well. Probably it just takes longer doing it that way. Like when we incubate a brand, it just takes longer to spool it up, to establish a name. They had a name established. They've been around a few years. So the challenge is finding those businesses that you can then convert into a franchise. And it's just a little harder. So that's why, we don't always, we've purchased one of our brands that we own, but it's hard for us to do that because we just don't feel like they set the franchise agreement up, or they get the business model figured out correctly from the very beginning. So that's why we end up doing it a lot in-house ourselves.
Got it.
The downside is it takes longer.
Got it. Okay. So I'm somewhat familiar with the story on Mosquito Joe getting moved over to Neighborly, and I understand that, and you can please correct me, but I understand that your initial investors, you had made a commitment to return their investment to them, and you saw the exit to Neighborly as an opportunity to steward that, really the trust that they had in you, steward it well. And so I'm curious, the vision that you had with Mosquito Joe and Buzz in the beginning to where it is now. How has the vision for the company changed? So you have, let me see if I can do it, Pool Scouts, British Swim School, Home Clean Heroes, and Grand Illuminations, now Wonderly Lights.
Wonderly Lights, correct?
Correct?
Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So those are the four brands. When we started Mosquito Joe and I raised money from the investors, there really wasn't a conversation that took place about it becoming a multi-brand franchise.
Oh,
It was really focused on Mosquito Joe. And that was part of the challenge overall as we grew, is that we were having success with Mosquito Joe and we were trying to figure out why we had that success. A lot of it came down to lessons learned in the past. It came down to the team that we had, how we supported our franchisees, but we said we could do that with other businesses. And so we began to start Pool Scouts, Home Clean Heroes. But then so it morphed into a multi-brand. I mean, in the back of my mind, I always believed if we did one thing well, we could do it with others. And then that ultimately happened. But because the business now, I still had that commitment that I had to honor with our investors. And so that's really what we did. And we figured out how to do that in a way where we could still continue to do what we're doing now, but realize a return for our investors. Some of that money we held back and we purchased British Swim School. So we sort of doubled
got
down,
it.
and it was a bittersweet, it was a bittersweet decision. I mean, the sweet part of it was clear. It was, we did very well on creating that business, on the investment. The bitter part of it was simply that, that was our first baby. We got a chance to meet guys like you,
Yeah.
Kirk Godwin. I mean, a whole bunch of folks that early on believed in it. We tried to manage the process in a way that was as professional as we could. We got the brand into the hands of an experienced franchisor, but it was still bittersweet. So but it is what it is, and we've moved on. Now we have 4 businesses that we're growing. That commitment's been honored. Now we're continuing to grow.
Into like,
So for your listeners, Wonderly Lights is effectively a business that initially has focused on hanging Christmas lights for the consumer. So hang them in the October, November timeframe, take them down in January. And for our seasonal businesses like Mosquito Joe and
yep.
Pool Scouts, it really fills a nice hole there. So you don't have to lay off your employees. You can keep your employees and smooth out the year. We had considered doing it initially with Mosquito Joe when it was just Mosquito Joe. And as we reached out to our franchisees, a lot of them were saying, we sort of bought into this whole idea of a seasonal business. We like taking the winters off and going down south.
Interesting.
So
Yeah.
we said, okay. And we were focused on other things. Maybe we just started different standalone brands. So that's what we did. But then we revisited it and we found that there were a couple of Mosquito Joe franchisees that had started a Christmas lights business. Trey, Powell, Jack, Sparks. So we reached out to them and we said, we always enjoyed working with you guys. Do you want to help us create this new business? Eventually we called Wonderly Lights. We sort of had some fits and starts on the name, and that's what we did. And then, we reached out to several franchisees. Many of them reached out to us, and we're back in the business, put the band together again. But it's been fun. It's been a lot of fun, and Brian Garrison, he's been leading that business and doing just a great job with it. We've got Kyle Beach back.
Kyle Beach, my guy.
Running the ops, so he's in a great role, and we have a woman named Alana who is doing all the marketing work. But they're doing a great job, and it's a really fun business. And you see these homes lit up, and it's a cool business. Meaning, it is for the franchisees a lucrative business. Customers are very sticky. Once you have a service come and put your Christmas lights up, you're never going to do it by yourself again. I'm never doing it again. It's been great.
Facts.
But it's been great, and it's been fun, and we got a lot of interest. So we're adding some other lighting, so other special events lighting, maybe some permanent landscape lighting to that overall. Some of the franchisees want to do that, and we're fairly flexible with ones that want to do it, ones that don't want to do it. But the key for us was everybody that's currently a franchisee of that business has been a current franchisee of another business, either Mosquito Joe, Pool Scout, or some others. So from our perspective, what that means is the risk of a large part of when you start a new business, from our perspective, is the risk of the new franchisee that you're bringing on, especially if they haven't been in business for themselves. It's a risk because you don't know if they're going to be successful or not. What you have works, but you don't know if what you have is going to work with them for the first time. That risk got eliminated with that group of franchisees that we brought on, because they're proven operators, and we know they're proven operators because we've seen them operate. They know how to recruit customers. They know how to recruit, train, and retain a great team to take care of those customers, and they know how to scale a business. And scaling's tough, and these guys all know how to scale in that truck. So you know how to do that now. So those skills are great, and I think we'll probably end up seeing just more of that in the future. These franchisees that have done really well in one business, just like we do, take that expertise and add another business and become a multi-brand franchisee. It's not for everybody, but for some people that've got the energy, they've got the capital, it's a great add-on to be able to do it, because you know how to do it.
Yo, thanks for listening this far. It's at this point in the episode that I want to talk about Streetwise franchising, teaching, training, building. Streetwise franchising. As a franchise consultant, it's my job, it's my absolute pleasure, and it's my mission to help aspiring entrepreneurs find, launch, and build their ideal business. I've been a franchise owner for almost a decade. I know what it means to struggle. I know what it means to build a team. If you're ready to get off of zero, if you're ready to build something for yourself, visit streetwisefranchising.com. Let's get the conversation started. Don't wait until tomorrow to build your future. It starts today. Streetwise franchising. Stay humble, stay hungry, stay streetwise. Let's get back to the episode. No, it's really cool. And I got to say, I've been spoiled by Mr. Kyle Beach. Back in the day, man, best business coach I ever had. I'll say it loud and proud right here, and I hope he hears it too. Love that guy.
That's great.
No, it's really cool, and I can resonate with that 100%. Do you find that franchise candidates coming into a new franchise period, whenever they're looking at picking a brand, I mean, you've got home services, you've got child enrichment, you've got pets, senior care, brick and mortar, health, restaurants, all the things. Do you find that from, the investor's mindset, certain candidates stick better to certain brands based on, their vision and maybe their interests and maybe even just the personality type?
Yeah, I think I'll give you one. I'll give you so the answer is yes, but I'll caveat that a little bit, meaning, so British Swim School is an example. British Swim School, what I find when we were doing our diligence on buying the business, one of the things I learned from the existing team that was there was they made this comment that our franchisees are different. Our franchisees are different than your franchisees. And I said, well, tell me how they're different. And the difference seems to have been in the fact that making money was important and having a business that was successful was important, but equally important was doing good in the community. So sort of this mission-based approach of teaching skills to toddlers, to children, full stroke development up to adults, how to survive in the water. In the case of British Swim School, drowning is the number one cause of death for small infants or kids under the age of 5. And so if you can teach these kids how to survive in the water, and it's not hard, they just have to go take the time, do the instruction. It's a pretty cool feeling. And so you look at those franchisees, and as I've gotten to know several of them, there is that mission oriented approach that they have. So that's where I've seen most of the differences within the two brands. Or two categories we're in, the child enrichment and the home services. I would say that's those are probably a couple of the biggest differences.
No, that makes sense, because we've added our second brand being Paint and Power Wash, and I just assumed that because I know home services through pest control, I'll be good at any home service brand. And I found that paint is very different. Operating a paint company is very different than a recurring revenue pest control business where density is key. And to your point of what you said earlier, I mean, with Mosquito Joe, at one point we had 6 territories, but we were way too spread out. And we found that our biggest territories where we have the most density, I mean, we're making 90% of our revenue in our top 2 territories, and they only bring in maybe 30% of our expenses. So our other territories, much less revenue, much more of the expenses because they're so spread out. Where paint, you've got a much bigger ticket. The team is completely different. I've always been curious about, for myself, if I were to add another brand, should I go with something that is operationally sound, that just flows easier, or should I go more to something that I'm passionate about. And I think I would have to pick one of the two, because just picking another home service just because, that didn't cut it for me the first time.
Yeah, yeah, it's a really good point. You made a comment about the number of territories. One of the things we've learned over the last, we've been at this now almost 12 years, is that on average we had a new franchisee would buy just over 2 territories. That average now has come down to less than 1.5 to about
Wow.
1.4. And and part of it is on our side, which is we want people to sort of crawl before they walk or before they run. And so take 1 territory, take 2 territories, but let's figure that out first, and let's see if it makes sense to add 3 and add 4. To your point, you just get spread out too thin, and you end up adding a lot of costs, and you can't scale the revenue of the business as fast. And so we've learned that, and that's one of the things that's changed with some of the way we recruit our franchisees. Yeah, in terms of the passion versus adding another home service, I think I think the skill set in that case, you adding the painting, it is sort of the one and done, and it's more project oriented as opposed to a route where you're going
So
every
sales heavy versus marketing and brand awareness and big blasts. It's you sold a $15,000 job. Great. You better sell another one tomorrow. Oh my
right,
gosh. Let's
right.
go.
Yeah, it's there's a higher ticket, right? Higher average ticket. There's a number of characteristics. So as you think about, you know, you would probably do really well in another route based you know, business that you understand how to scale, you know how to get the density that's required, and then it's recurring. And there's
Yep.
something nice about recurring. So it really comes down to, part of the skill, you sell once and then you service, and you could service for several years, as opposed to the painting business, you're really always selling. I know that people have to get their homes painted every, 5 years or 7 years or something. That's
Sure.
what they say.
That's what they
But
say. Yeah.
but it's different. You're always selling. So then if you think about that, you need really, and they're big ticket things, and you gotta, so it's a different skill set than selling a $70 service to somebody that's every 21 days, and that can really, it's just different. So there's a lot of characteristics, I think, when evaluating it. And I think if you've done one well, then you know that really well. That's probably where your leverage, where you'll get the most leverage from.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you saying that. What about from your side, on the franchisor side, when you guys are looking to add? I mean, if you think Pool Scouts is going to be similar to a Mosquito Joe model, Home Clean Heroes, similar. When you guys are thinking about adding something, even British Swim School is, I would assume, is more of a monthly subscription
Yeah.
type of a
Yeah.
concept. Do you play that in as well? Do you feel like you guys operate within a niche, or do you feel like over time you'll expand those out too?
Probably, yeah. So I think, we look at things all the time. We're always looking at different opportunities. We've come close on a couple on the child enrichment space. It's
Ooh, okay.
it's different. One of the things we liked about when we purchased a British Swim School was that it had a founder that was passionate about the business. She had set up a really good curriculum. The initial set of franchisees she had proven the concept out and have done well. It was an asset light model. In that space, we have competitors that require building $3 to $4 million pools. Our investment's about $150,000. So sort of chalk and cheese. It's very different, right? So she had set it up, but at the same time, it was still a bootstrap startup. So the money was being sucked out of the business. Resources were not being added as she wanted to scale. And that was perfect for us because we had the resources, we had the people, we had the money to be able to support that growth and scale it. And so there was and she set the model up, not exactly the way we would do it, but it was the closest we've seen to anything out there with the way we like setting the model. As you know, Matthew, I mean, we're big believers in marketing and the
Yep.
investment required on marketing. We feel that is something that most people don't understand or know well. So if we can do that well and help people scale their business quicker by deploying marketing dollars and then in return getting customers that will be around for a while, that's a great thing to do. And so we've really built up that part of our business so it cuts across all of our brands to help that out. Most Most franchisors don't do that. They don't set the model up right. And so for us to go and buy a business that has 50 franchisees, but there's no way of really getting leverage for what we have to scale at, we'd rather start it ourselves and have it take longer.
Got it. Okay. No, it's really cool. And I remember when we first started in Mosquito Joe and we were starting to see some success in our space versus other competitors that had been around longer, and the branding. I mean, that's the only thing I could attribute to. And I didn't really understand what about the branding. I just knew the branding was better, and I could see it based on our numbers and how we were growing, but how the system was growing as a whole. But no, you guys did a really good job. I mean, it was funny.
I would say, well, you know Angela. When you met her, she was Angela Zerdas. Angela Pauls now. She really led all of and continues to this day as our chief marketing officer, handling all of that, the brand identification building. She's got a good sense of humor. So the Mosquito Joe approach with using humor in our marketing, it really suited her well. And the stuff was really funny. I mean, we used an agency as well, but it was really, really funny stuff. And as a result, and humor's hard to do, but as a result, it was very memorable for people. So all of a sudden we became the category killer, which is, okay, if people are thinking of calling somebody for mosquito control, who do they call? It's Mojo, right? Mosquito Joe, Mojo, and they'll
Yep.
remember sort of funny ads that they've seen. So it really worked out well. We've used some humor in Pool Scouts, but we don't use it everywhere. It's hard to do.
Sure. Yeah, I could see that. I'm interested, you bring up Angela, and I remember I know a lot of the initial Buzz team is still there. You guys have just gotten bigger and expanded. What's it like building out that team? Like, what are you guys looking for when it comes to developers, people that help in operations and marketing? From your position, I mean, that's managing the people and building it out. I mean, how important is picking the right folks, and how do you guys handle that?
Yeah, it's a great question. It probably is one of the more important aspects of scaling a business. So the first is, a lot of the time, especially now with Brian, Angela, Mike, Paul, myself, we're constantly thinking about resources. And as we scale businesses, when do we need to add resources? And we want to add them well in advance of when they're needed, so we get them trained up and really be experienced by the time they're needed. That's really important. When it comes down to then the individuals that we hire, we've got a pretty structured approach, which is a series of screens that are done, telephone interviews that are done. And what you're trying to determine during that period of time is, do they have the skills, the background? Have they done this job before, and have they done it successfully? If they have, great, check that box. We then bring them in and we put them through sort of a battery of interviews with everybody. They usually come in for 2/3 of a day, sometimes a full day, and they literally go from office to office to office, sit down with the team, have lunch with them. And really what we're trying to do then is assess fit. Can anybody identify red flags with this person? Are they not going to be a good fit? Usually when we've made mistakes in hiring, it's usually we've deviated from that process somewhere.
Interesting.
And I'll be the first to admit, there's been a couple of times where I sort of claimed executive privilege. I deviated from the process. We're going to hire this person that turned out to be a nightmare. I throw and fire the person myself, and then do my mea culpa, and then just move on and go back to the process. So we don't deviate from the process much anymore. We try to stick with that. It's worked really well for us. But getting the right people is really important. We put a lot of time and effort into, once we get the right people, we want to keep them. And so we try to create a work environment where people love coming to work. They feel appreciated. They feel like there's a lot of collaboration. And, as a result, we have people that have been with us for quite a while. You mentioned a few of them. Angela and Mike have been with me from the very beginning. Brian came on shortly thereafter. We got guys like Kyle back now. We got a number of people that have been with me well over 5 years. And we're still really a relatively young company, but that is the most important thing with scaling a business, is getting the right people, for sure.
Man, no, that's awesome. And I love diving into moments of humility. You just hit me with one, talking about, when you get involved in the process, it doesn't always go. How have you had to develop as a leader yourself as the business has just reached new heights, and as you guys expand and do bigger things?
Yeah. So I think I've always felt like I've delegated well. So like I'm not a micromanager. And so for me to be able to do that, I have to be much better at hiring. And so the process of hiring people is good. That's number one. And the second part is you have to have really good dashboards in place and information. So the information then can flow to me through, we use a business intelligence tool called Tableau, but getting the right information to flow through to me so that I can see and adjust, that helps me and gives me the confidence to be able to say, okay, you're making all these decisions. You go and just run with that. I've always felt like that's what I have to do, and I have to do that well, because if I don't do that well, then it's really tough to scale. I'm fortunate to have somebody like Mike, Hull, Brian, Angela. They're all super analytic, and so being able to create, the right information to look at really helps with all of that. So that's probably some of the areas where I've enjoyed that part. I've also really enjoyed watching people develop, and that part has been really cool. Like when I started this 12 years ago, I underestimated how much I would really enjoy working with younger people, if you will, the 20 somethings. Sure. And it's been fun. I mean, they got so much energy, so many great new ideas. I mean, it's just really a lot of fun to watch that. And so if you can harness those ideas and that energy, it really becomes something special to watch and be part of.
Leadership gets easier when you have a lot of amazing people around you, but that's kind of the art and the science, is making sure that you get those great people around you and that you have the capacity to actually lead and have everybody pointed in the same direction.
Yeah,
sure.
I think it's that. I think we tried to create, so if you think about our business, we have about 75 full-time professionals doing the work of franchising. So we've grown quite a bit. Close to half of those people have ownership in Buzz franchise brands. And so, we give people the opportunity to invest money. We give them the opportunity to be part of incentive unit plans. And so most of that is geared towards our more tenured employees as well. But it's just, it's another great tool of being able to say, thank you, number one. Number two, being able to continue to retain good people and let them participate in the success over time that we'll have. So yeah, it's been great. It's been really a lot of fun.
Oh, it's really cool to see, man. I got to say, from somebody that got to be inside for a little bit, and now I get to see things just on a different level as a consultant, and building out this platform and having you on, and it's just really cool to see the growth. When I look at franchising, and as I'm trying to be a student of the game, there's a lot of like key and kind of big topics that get hit on and you get cycled around. You hear like semi-absentee ownership, if that's like a real thing. You hear a lot about responsible franchising right now. But with you, private equity in franchising, I mean, this was something that I didn't come from this background. I was a inner city football coach and a substitute teacher before I got my start in franchise ownership. And so hearing about private equity at a big level, but I'm learning there's multiple levels to it. Maybe how has private equity played into like your guys' franchise experience, and how can somebody like me learn about the influence that private equity has on, maybe my businesses or the franchising industry as a whole?
Yeah. So private equity, I was in private equity for about 8 years. And when I say that, it's we raised a dedicated blind pool of capital that we could then deploy into investments over time and then ultimately harvest those investments. The way we set Buzz Franchise Brands up is the private equity capital we have is all from individuals. So it's not institutional capital at all. So there's no timeline associated with that. So I feel like I've got a really good group of investors that have been very supportive over the years and have take a long-term perspective. Private equity, though, what you're referring to, Matthew, is a lot of these. There could be several different sizes of funds. Like business Mosquito Joe now is owned effectively by KKR, right? KKR owns Neighborly, Neighborly owns Mosquito Joe. So I think private equity has been attracted to franchising for a number of different reasons. One, They value the business model itself, the local ownership, and the having people drive that business at a local level is important. I think they valued it from once they buy the business or create the business, there's not a lot of ongoing capital that needs to be reinvested in the business. And so
Mm,
you think manufacturing companies and other things, you're always investing in plant and equipment and other things. You don't need to do that in the franchising business. So it's a very efficient use of capital. It's a very scalable business, and there's different ways of scaling through existing franchisees, adding new territories, some going global and adding other countries to it. So I think they like that. The home services space, which is what we know really well, is they view that as being somewhat insulated from groups like Amazon and others. You hear these
got
concepts
it.
of Amazon proof. So and some goods. There's a lot of really good private equity out there that adds value to the businesses. They're very, they're smart guys. But the thing you have to remember, private equity is you're on a time frame usually, and
Okay.
you're so if you take private equity money from a company, you might as well sort of turn the treadmill on, turn it on high, and that treadmill is not going to stop until those guys get their money out. And so it's going to be a fairly intense ride, as the guys that probably Neighborly can attest to, and others. But generally, I think they're a force for good. I think they provide capital and help people grow their businesses. So I think it's overall a really good business. But you just have to know the pros and cons before you accept
Sure.
private equity money.
Do you see that at the franchisee level? Do
Yeah,
we
you start to see
typically
it.
notice a difference?
Yeah, you start to see it at the franchisee level as well in certain segments. So like originally you saw a lot of private equity in the restaurant space. So, you had a lot of
Okay.
private equity in fast food, McDonald's. You began to see it several years ago in the fitness space. So Planet Fitness, others.
Orange
Um,
Theory.
Orange Theory, yep, you're seeing that there. So these are funds that are actually getting into creating a company and then buying up franchisees and being a franchisee of the concept. And then more recently, you've seen it in home services as well. So historically, and it's interesting to me because private equity typically likes to always be in the driver's seat. And when you become a franchisee, you're not really in the driver's seat. You're sharing the front seat with the franchisor. And so they figured that out, but that is something that it limits them a little bit. Some private equity likes to buy up and do what they call add-on acquisitions. A little tougher in with the franchisor who ultimately has the final approval on some of those things.
Sure.
So
Sure.
again, pros and cons, but it's I think generally good, force for good, because there's been a lot of criticism of them over the years, but I'm a believer it's a force for good.
Yeah, I could see it, just, people being worried about, franchising, this opportunity for individuals to come in as small business owners. And there's maybe a fear or a little anxiety towards, big business kind of taking over this
Yeah.
space. I just find it really interesting, and I'm trying to learn as much as I can in and around all things franchising, and that's a big one right now. So the last question I want to ask you, because I totally respect your time, and this has been great getting to talk to you on here. What would you advise somebody? And this is something I ask just about everybody as I in the episodes. You get people, whether or not they want to launch their first franchise themselves as a franchisee, or they have a business and they want to turn it into a franchise, or they want to start walking down that path, but they're comfortable where they're at, and they're looking to take that first step in getting off of zero. That's a big theme of this show. How do you get off of zero? How would you, Mr. Kevin Wilson, coach somebody up when they're considering taking that first step off of zero?
I think taking that first step, unless you have sort of a unique set of skills that you've developed in a different business that would allow you just to start your own business from scratch, that's the power of a franchise, right? I think you have all the systems in place, you have all the accumulated experience on what worked, what didn't work, and the likelihood of success is much higher. So that's why I've always been a big believer in the franchise model. I believe that my team is super passionate about supporting people to be successful. Then it comes down to really what is the right fit? What's the right business for you to get into? And that's where people like yourself really help. I mean, that's not something that when people come to me that I don't know or I know fairly well, I don't direct them to my brands. Because I think the right thing to do is see what's out there and see, evaluate, explore a bunch of things and see what sort of wets your whistle a little bit, right? Like find out something that, like a lot of people, like in our case, British Swim School, would you like to set up a swim lessons brand? Most people initially would say, well, I hadn't even thought about that. That sounds terrible. And then they look at it and they begin to see the characteristics and the traits of why that works. And then they say, well, that's interesting. Didn't know about that. And then they see what it costs. Oh, that's interesting. And then they see the end result of kids. That's a cool thing to be able to do. And so it really comes down to, that fit. There's so much of that, which is important. It's just like when we recruit our employees, right? Which is we spend a lot of time on the fit. We know in our case, and most franchisors know this, the business models work. Like otherwise they wouldn't be franchising. And if they don't work and they're franchising, you got to stay away from that crew. And there's ways of doing the research to know if they're going to be successful or not. But ultimately the models should work. And then it comes down to you as the individual. And so where we've failed, and I mean, we collectively, both on the franchisee side and our side, if somebody gets into one of our franchises and it doesn't work out, it's never the business, because we know the business works. And sometimes we've had franchisees that haven't worked. We've put different franchisees in there. They've been super successful. So it comes down to that individual. And for whatever reason, that wasn't the right business for them, or owning your own business just wasn't the right thing. But the highest likelihood of success will come, I believe, from doing it with people that have shown they've done it before successfully. And that's a franchise operation. So big believer in doing that. That's what I would recommend. Get a coach, evaluate different opportunities, do a real deep dive internally as to what's important to you, and then go out and find a concept and a group of people that are the franchisors that align very nicely with what those things are that are important to you. And you'll probably be successful.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Well, like I said, man, I respect your time. It is such an honor to have you on this platform, man. Thank you so much.
Matthew, I've enjoyed being on here. I've really enjoyed watching your journey too. And I love the pictures you post to your kids. And that's been fun, beautiful family. And it's been really fun to watch your success take off too, because we caught you at a pretty young age. I mean, you're still young now, but you're definitely at a pretty young age. So it's really cool to see that.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, man. And to the listener, you guys heard some special things on this one. You really did listen to it twice. If you're interested in starting your franchise journey at Buzz Franchise, know where it's at. I can introduce you to the amazing team myself. But until next time, stay humble, stay hungry, stay streetwise. Peace.
Nice, man.
All right, everybody, that's a wrap. Thank you so much for making it to the end. Hey, if this episode added any value to your life at all, please like it, share it, give me a 5-star review. It's the only way that this show is going to gain traction and help more people achieve their dreams. If you're ready to start your franchise journey, visit streetwisefranchising.com. Let's set up a time to talk. Hit me up on LinkedIn. Until next time, stay humble, stay hungry, stay streetwise. Peace.